to my channel and another episode of iLearn. So in this episode, we'll be going through a copy into command, which is a new command that has been introduced by Microsoft for Synapse. But before I dive into that, I just wanted to tell you that past couple of months have been quite busy for me, and I'm able to learn so many things. So if you talk about the technicalities of it, I'm able to get started with a language called Scala, so which has been quite popular nowadays. Along with that, I've been able to look into the Databricks side of the things. That's a service that Microsoft has provided, and that has been quite popular among the IT professionals working on data front. So it can be leveraged to do several things like data mining or data modeling, or as well as data preparation, which can be used for AI purposes. So I always wanted to discuss about it, or I always wanted to learn on it, and there could not be better opportunity other than working on the project itself. Yes, you can learn by looking into some of the videos, by doing self practice, but until and unless you work on the real project, I think the information that you get is in a half baked state. So having said that, I think along with the learning, there comes the challenges as well. So I hope I've been able to live up to my expectations. When I do a self kind of assessment, I think I've did well, but there is a lot of ground to be covered. There is a lot of things that I needed to be get expertise on. So yeah, so this has been quite a few busy past 2 months, and that's why I think that was the reason I was not able to make any videos, any demo videos, but we are back at it. So as we discussed in the starting, we'll be looking at the copy into command. So from there onwards, the technical stuff will start. We'll do some demo as well. I'll try to show you the command, how it works, what are the advantages of using it, and what are the disadvantages of using it. And if you talk about the basic scenario, so what we are talking about is that you have been given data in any format. Uh, it is a structured format, first of all. It could be a CSV file, Parquet file, and you've given this, and you've given the task to load this data into your table, which is in Synapse, which is nothing but your SQL data warehouse. Now, how do you do that? There could be a number of ways to do it. You can use Azure Data Factory, but it means that you might have to spin up a new resource. You might have to provision a new resource, which can incur additional cost. So Microsoft has provided this copy into command, which can be used, and I think it's a bulk load mechanism if you try to compare with the on-premise version. And with this, you can easily load data into the target table. I think it was this copy into command was in preview mode for quite a few days, but I think it has been rolled out with all the capabilities. So let's explore that. So let's start doing the demo, and we'll get to know more about it, and we'll get to learn more about it. So let me share my screen, and let's begin with that. So we'll start right from the scratch. We are not account, and what you would need for this demo is that you would need to provision a SQL dedicated pool. This is a new name that has been given to a SQL data warehouse, Azure SQL data warehouse. I think earlier it went by the name of Synapse, but I think they have introduced a new all together a new service that is called Synapse Analytics, which encompasses most of the analytics services. So that's something that needs to be explored. So we might want to cover that in the upcoming videos. I did a little research on that, but we'll cover more that in the coming videos. And along with that, you would need to provision a blob storage account or Azure storage account. So our storage account has been given a name of test copy 2021 Feb 3, and our Synapse data warehouse or SQL dedicated pool goes by the name of test copy into data warehouse. So you would need these two accounts to be provisioned, and we need not mention that you will need an SSMS software installed on your screen. So that is also one of the prerequisite. So let's take one step at a time, and let's assume that you have not configured anything, and the problem statement is that you have a couple of files in your storage account, which we will explore now. So open the containers, and inside the containers, we have this folder called hotel reviews. Inside hotel reviews, we have HR. So we have these two files, CSV and Parquet files, and we try to load these files into the target table or the target destination. Now we will be taking the help of SQL Server. So you could have done it with Azure Data Factory as well. But as I mentioned in the uh, during my introduction, that if you provision Azure Data Factory, that will incur extra costs, so that the organization would not want that. So all we need is the SSMS software. This is SQL Server Management Studio software. And once we log into SSMS, we can copy the data from the blob storage to the Synapse table. But the authentication that we will be using in this case is Azure Active Directory authentication, which means that you need not pass any password, any credentials. So it's very safe in that respect. So we will start right from the scratch. We will try to create we will try to create an Azure Active user, Azure Active Directory user. And once you create an Azure Active Directory user, then you have to set that as an admin onto the SQL server on which the Synapse is hosted. It's a logical server because everything is on the cloud. And once you've set the admin, we will log in into the SSMS, and then we will try to query the data, or then we will try to load the data. So I hope the steps make sense. So first of all, we will create a user. Second is we will make the user as admin. And the third is we will using this user credentials, or using this user, or by logging into this SSMS using this user's credentials, we will try to copy the data from blob storage to our Synapse table. So let's get started. So first of all, we have to create a user. So we will go into Azure Active Directory under the users tab, and let's create a new user. So it's 10th of Feb. So let's call our user as Feb 10, and let's give it a name as Feb 10 2021, any random name. So you can copy the complete username. So username will be the name that we have provided with the domain. So we can copy this and keep it handy somewhere. So I've copied it. And now you can copy the password as well. So first of all, let's supply the password. Sorry, this is the first name, last name, not the password. So there is an option of creating a password yourself, or you can use the auto-generated password. So we will go with auto-generated password, and let's see what the password is so that we can save it somewhere and keep it handy whenever we need it. So let's create the user. So I think in a while the user will be created. Now, going back to the steps that we had listed out, once we have created the user, now it's time to go back to the server, Synapse server. So your SQL pool is hosted on a server which goes by the name of Brown Bag 2020 database Windows 10. So you click on that. Once you click on that, uh, you need to go into the left pane, and you need to click on Active Directory window or Active Directory admin. So you can see that already an Active Directory admin has been added or assigned. So let's try to remove this, and let's try to assign a new user, and we will be using Feb 10. So type in here. So Feb 10 is coming up. Let's select this, and let's now save it. So now what we have done is we have made the user we just created as the admin to the server. So now the third step comes into play, where we want to log in to the SSMS using this new user credentials. So let's see whether we are able to log in successfully or not. So let's do that, and let's try to connect. And yes, so this is the error message that I wanted to show you. So once you directly create the user and directly use the credentials, the SSMS will not allow you to use those credentials. I'm not sure why the reason is, but what it means is that you have to log into the portal to change the password. So we will try to sign out, and we will sign in using new credentials. Or we can again type in the portal.azure.com and again try to sign out. I think there was an option to use a different user, so we could have used that. But anyways, let's do it from scratch. So we can use a new user now. So let's type in a new user that we just created, and let's type in the password. So see, it's asking for us to change the password. So let's change the password and set it to something that we can remember. Now the password has been changed. We can update the password if we want. So now using this password, we will log into the SSMS and let's see whether we are able to do that or not, whether we are able to log into the SSMS or not. We can say remember password. It seems to be working. So we are able to log in. I think we will be able to log into the SSMS. Now what we want to try to do is we want to go back to the admin of this portal. So let's try to log in. So now we have logged into the portal. Why we have done that is because I wanted to show you how the data looks like. And I hope we are able to log in here as well. And the database that we'll be using is test copy into DWH. And let's see what are the tables inside it. Okay, so I think the services have been paused. So let's resume the services. Yes, we want to resume. So yeah, so that's the benefit of using Azure services. Most of the services, they come with the option of pause or resume, which means that you can use as much as you want. And if you don't want to use it, you can pause it and you'll not be charged or billed for that particular time period. So that's always a good feature. You can also scale up and scale down as per your demand. And in the meantime, let's go to the portal and see what are the source files. What is the data inside the source files? Now let's go into this test copy 2021 and go into the containers, hotel reviews, HR. So let's see what do we have here. So we have two columns which are separated by comma. One is address and the other one is categories. Go back to the SSMS. Now let's see whether it has been resumed or not. Let's refresh this. I think it's still resuming. In the meantime, I think we can prepare our query. And so there is always a documentation that has been provided or that Microsoft always provides with every feature or command it introduces. So let's visit that. What we want to do is we want to get the syntax so that we don't have to write the syntax from scratch, or you don't have to write the entire syntax on your own. So this is the copy into SQL using Synapse. And there are supported authentication mechanisms that you can see on your screen. You have managed identity, you have SaaS, you can use AAD authentication. So we'll be using AAD authentication. And if you want to, I mean, if you don't want to refer to the video that you are watching and you want to refer to the what do you call the original documentation, then you can visit the Microsoft site. So what we want is this thing to be copied here, or maybe let's see what's happening with the server. So the server has been resumed, or it's up and running. So now we can try to connect this, and I am sure you will be able to see the tables. So one thing with copy into command is that the table should already exist and it should have the exactly the same structure if you want to copy without adding or without explicitly specifying the column names. If the table is not present, you have to create it. But you have the choice of selecting few columns or all the columns. Over here, we'll be using all the columns. We only have two columns as you just saw. And let's expand the tables node now. Yeah, so one is hotel reviews free. So uh, let's actually create, or let's actually try to load the data into this table. Right click on it. And what we would say is we would say new query. So again, guys, I hope this is helpful because I'm doing right from the scratch. And we will try to fix some of the ground zero, what do you call messages, or we will try to fix those errors that you face while you're doing the deployment, or when you, sorry, not the deployment, the development. So for in our first case, we will be loading the file that has a CSV format. Now you need to get the URL, and how you can get the URL is, I think you can use this. You can go to the properties and you can copy the URL and paste it here. Now, before we do anything, let's see what's the data, because we want to ensure that the data is loaded. And for that, we might have to delete the data, the existing data. So let's query the table. So the table has 40 rows. So we'll say delete. So let's run this. So the 40 rows have been deleted, and let's see that whether we have any data. So the table is empty. Now we will run this command. So the command in terms of syntax is very simple. All you have to do is specify the target table that already exists. And then you have to specify the source file path along with the name. And then the third parameter is the file type. So let's run this. Okay. So that's an interesting one. Should be able to get the data. Okay, I think we missed one thing. So we have added, we created a user and we're trying to interact with the blob storage. But how does the blob storage know that the user that you're trying to use uh, is authorized to is authorized to perform this action or is authenticated to perform this action? So for that, what you have to do is you have to go to the, I think we missed one step, and that's good that we missed that, because now you will be aware of why it works. So we will go into the test copy 2023 Feb 3 container, and we will go into the access control, and we will try to add the role assignment. So what role assignment are we looking for is we are looking for the storage owner, blob storage contributor, or just write blob. So you can have either of these three roles. And how do we know that only these three roles are supported? You can again refer to the documentation, and you can see here that you need to have the owner or the contributor or the reader is your role if you want to fetch data directly from the container. So what we will be using is we'll be making the user that we have just created as the owner. And here we will search for that particular user. And our user was Feb 10, 2021. And let's try to save this. Okay, so I think it has been added. Now, I think we might have to wait for some time, or we might not have to, but let's give it a try. Let's run this query again. Okay, so I think it might take some time. Let's see whether we have the right credentials for this. So this is the user, and we have given the user the data owner access. So let's wait for a couple of minutes, or maybe just copy this command, close this window altogether, and then open a new query window. The reason I know that it takes a couple of minutes is because I've tried in the past as well. I tried to do a rehearsal before recording the session, and I think it also took some time. I'm not sure exactly how much time it took, but I think it was somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes. So let's run this again. Okay, this doesn't look promising. Let's wait for some more time. Because I think in terms of following all the steps, we have done that. We have made the user as admin, and we have given this user the owner role on this container. So just bear with me. Okay, let's try now. Okay, the target table must exist. So what happened with the target table? Oh, right. So we actually copied the syntax from the Microsoft documentation, and that's why you had target table assigned over here. But I think this looks a little promising. At least we are not getting that authentication error message. So here you go, guys. I think you just have to wait for 3 or 4 minutes and it works. So now let's try to query this table. And let's see what happens. Awesome. So you're able to see the data that has propagated without any failures. So this was the case of CSV file. Now let's try to load the Parquet file. And for Parquet file, we have load Parquet table, and it has slightly different structure. You can see the columns inside it. You can get the sample Parquet file if you try to search online. But if you want, you can ping in the comments. I will try to get the Parquet file for you. And let's try to paste the table name. Now we have the table name. What we need is we need the the source file URL, and the source file resides inside the container, blob container, and this is the source file. So let's click on properties, copy the URL. Just as a side note, I think you can also use, it's preferable to use Azure Blob Explorer, which is a desktop application where you can access the containers and all the folders and the files inside it. So in this case, the format would be Parquet. Now I'm expecting this to throw error because this property is not supported for Blob, is not supported for the Parquet. I think Parquet you have to use DFS, distributed file system. Now I'm exactly not sure what's the difference between DFS and Blob here, but anyways, let's try to run this. And I think it should throw an error message uh, related to parameters or something like that. But let's see what we get. See, I told you that it will throw this error message, parameters provided to connect to the blob server not valid. So now what we can do now is we can try to use DFS, and I'm sure it will be a success. But before that, let's again try to query the load Parquet table. It's not giving us the name in auto intelligence, but let's not worry about it. Okay, so we have 1000 rows. So let's not try to delete it. We have not put any check in the as far as the data quality is concerned. So if this query runs, we will end up with 2000 rows. And the expectation is that the query will run. So here you go, guys. The query has run, and we might see 2000 rows now. So this was the case. So we have CSV file, or we had CSV, or we have CSV and Parquet file. CSV works with Blob, and Parquet works with DFS. Let's see whether CSV works with DFS or not. CSV works with DFS. It's just that Parquet doesn't like Blob, and that's why it does not work with that. Now there was another issue that we ran into. So what happens if the path does not exist? Okay. So let's try to use the same thing. Path, what I mean by path does not exist is, for example, if you have an inaccurate path or the inaccurate URL, so instead of HR, we have HR2, and we clearly know that there is no HR2 because there is only one folder HR. So what would happen in that case? Let's try to query that, or let's try to test it out. So you can say that clearly this makes sense. It threw us an error message of a server not found, but you will not get the error message when you use the blob property. Again, I think we need to do a deep dive into it. If somebody knows about it, then well and good. You can ping in the comments so that all the other audience they get aware of this. So let's try to run this now. So you see, it did not complain about the path. So this was a case in our case as well. Uh, we had a similar situation, and we didn't want the code to break. So that is the expectation. So in that case, you might want to use blob, but the other thing is you cannot use Parquet in that case. So I hope it makes sense. I hope you get a fair idea of what copy into command is for. It's only for Synapse, and you can always refer to this documentation, and I'll try to share it in the comments box. I think there is one more documentation. So there is one documentation that gives you the exact definition of it. Yeah, so this is the exact definition of it. And the one that we used was specially related to the authentication. So I think let's try to summarize this. If you have blob, you can only use CSV. If you have DFS, you can use CSV plus Parquet. So there is another type which is supported, which is called ORC. And then we discovered if you use glob, no error message if path or directory does not exist. In case of DFS, there will be error message if path or directory does not exist. So this was all about copy into command, and we'll meet in the next video, guys. Till then, take good care of yourself. Bye, guys.